and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick, and today we are coming to you from beautiful Fort Monroe, one of the prettiest spots in Hampton, and my guest, our host actually, is Kirsten Talken-Spaulding. Thank you for having us.
I am so glad you guys are out here, and what a beautiful day to be at Fort Monroe.
I mean, is there a bad day to be at Fort Monroe, Kirsten?
Well, I'm glad you said it, because when I say it, people just don't believe me, but it really is true. Fort Monroe really is one of the gems of not just Hampton, but of the entire peninsula, and dare I say, part of the National Park Service. I think it's a real gem for the entire nation.
So how long have you been here now?
Wow. So the post was deactivated as an active military site, if we all remember, back in September of 2011. And then November 1st of 2011 was when President Barack Obama declared the national monument. It was that same day that I was asked to be superintendent, and it was 2 days later that I was here on site. So I've been here since, what, the 3rd of November, 2011.
So you've had some time now to really get to know the place, its beauty, its assets, maybe some challenges. And the Park Service has been working through, I don't know, what we would maybe call a community plan in the city business, or what business might call, you know, a strategic plan. But this concept of, why is the Park Service here, and what's our mission?
And I'm glad you say it like that. What is our mission? And it's always fun to be in uniform when I'm talking, because the mission is right on our sleeve. It's about the natural and cultural resources and the connection with the people, so the recreational part of it too. And that's part of what our planning has been all about. You say kind of getting to know Fort Monroe over the last 2 years. You guys know this. You live in a place. I grew up in Williamsburg. This was my background. This was my playground, was out here. But it's really different when you move here and you live here in a different setting. And now that we're looking at the space as a national park unit, we've really needed a plethora of different voices to talk about what it means to be part of the national park system. And so through our planning process, which we call a foundation document for the first part of it, we take a look at what is the most significant parts of Fort Monroe. What is, if we lost it, we would lose what quintessentially it means to be nationally significant as Fort Monroe is. So our partners with the City of Hampton, and also of course with the Fort Monroe Authority here, have been a huge part of that dialogue, along with just a plethora of different folks from the community and constituent groups and that sort of thing in the dialogue.
I think one of the things that is so different about Fort Monroe, and we went through this when we were being the advocates to try to get it declared a national park, is that there's not just one significance. You know, like Hatteras is National Seashore, and you know, Yorktown is a battlefield, and they have that one defining characteristic. And Fort Monroe has a couple dozen defining characteristics.
I have to tell you that that is one of the quintessential challenges of any planning process, for Fort Monroe even more so. The history of Fort Monroe is over 400 years ago, when the when the Indians were here, Algonquin-speaking Indians, and then of course when Christopher Newport and John Smith came through. They were here before Jamestown, of course, and they came in 1607, and then 1609 the first fort here. So it's over 400 years of amazing history that helps to tell basically the story of the nation. I always joke that when we get a group out here, I start just right across the way over here at the cistern, and I say, you know, billions and billions of years ago, the earth was but a mass of molten lava, you know, channeling my inner Sagan. And you always get the glossy-eyed folks that are like, oh my God, she's gonna start with the founding of the earth. But to understand Fort Monroe, you actually kind of have to do that. You go back to how we got the Chesapeake Bay, because it all starts with location, location, location. So when everybody was advocating to make Fort Monroe part of the national park system, they actually started with that. They talked about the natural history that was here. They talked about the flyways and the migratory birds that are here. They talked about the connection with the Native Americans, and really how this was almost like a grocery store for them, and a main part of understanding what it meant to be a sustainable society was here out in what became known as Old Point Comfort. And then, of course, as we all talk about the Civil War history, which is really fascinating, and the contraband story, but in this year of the bicentennial of the War of 1812, we got to talk about, that's why we're even here.
That's why we have the big fort. I mean, it was a fortification against the Indians before that, but it was truly built up to keep the British from sailing up the harbor again.
Right, because of course then we are at Hampton Roads. And so of course the waterways were our, what we call today our I-64 and 664 and our interstate system were really the waterways.
So how do you hone in on this stuff? When you have all of that and when you have, you know, the first slave ship basically came in here and slavery ended and all that, and then you also have, you know, the North Beach, I'll try to stop saying Dog Beach, but, you know, beautiful, fairly natural areas in a very urban place that doesn't have very much of that. So limited federal dollars, limited staff, what are we going to see next?
Well, you know, it really is, I don't think you do well by eliminating any one of those really important stories, but I think it's really figuring out how do you manage the stories and help people to hear them and also connect with the resources that are out here. I think a lot of times when you go to some place that's got National Historical Park name with it, or if it's got National Seashore, you really get focused in on one thing about that site. We're not those. We're a national monument, which really is one of the most unique and meaningful designations that you can have. And as a national monument, Fort Monroe is really phenomenal because it does have all of that incredible cultural history. It's got incredible natural history, as you're alluding to, some of the last really almost natural landscapes along the Chesapeake Bay area. And then it's just got this incredible recreational resources. I know we were talking a little bit earlier about it's the middle of the week as we're taping this, and there's a ton of people out on the seawall enjoying themselves because it really is just a gorgeous spot to be.
So the big questions, I'm going to guess, that you get asked all the time is, when is there going to be a big sign at the entrance, and when is Dog Beach going to transfer?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you say it like that. When is it going to transfer? We don't have any lands yet that are part of the national park system. So we are here as partners with the Fort Monroe Authority. When land finally transfers, that's when we'll get a sign up. I hate to put the, you know, welcome mat out.
So the sign would go up that way. I mean, you have land, don't you have the buildings?
No lands yet. So we've been leasing the building that we're in, which is Old Lee's Quarters. That building we've been leasing from the Fort Monroe Authority since day one almost. So no, we don't have any lands yet. When that land finally does transfer, that's when the signs will start to go up. Hopefully I'll get some signs up onto the highway beforehand. I've been given some leeway to be able to make that happen.
Oh, that's good.
And so we're going to try and do that. That's, of course, is going to drive all kinds of traffic into the Hampton area.
Yeah, I think it will.
I think it will. And as for the north end and your question about when is that going to transfer, it is a transfer directly from a federal agency, which is the Army, to another federal agency, the Department of Interior, National Park Service. And there's some cleanup that's happening. A lot of folks don't realize.
I can't see it. It's so frustrating.
I know. Well, so what folks don't realize is that's actually a landfill space. So the landfill that was there is still going through a remediation and being cleaned up. And so that needs to happen before there's a transfer. And in the midst of all of that, in talking with the Army, we tried to understand whether, you know, can it be left open for folks to be able to go up into the north end or not? And the Army's mission is very clear in this. They're in the BRAC, they're in the closure.
Their whole idea was to be out 2 or 3
Absolutely,
years ago.
and part of what they have to do with that is make sure they're spending as little federal dollars as possible here. And with that in mind, they did study whether it's more dollars to keep the doors open or more dollars to keep the gates closed there. And they found that it's actually cheaper for them to keep the gates closed and monitor a closed gate than to have that area open.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us and showing us all your sites. I look forward to coming back again and again.
Can't wait to have you guys here. Remember, this is your backyard. This is your national park.
Thank you. I couldn't have put it better. We'll close on what she said. This is your national park. Thank you.